Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy. The Russell Cosmogony by Walter Russell, SC.D. and Lau Russell. A home study course for the transformation of man. Unit 9, Lessons 33, 34, 35, 36. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. No part of this manuscript can be printed in any form without permission from the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a magazine or newspaper. Special IUMA Relations Unit issued by the Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, SC. D. and Lau Russell. CO. C. CC. C./T. Go. Lesson number 33. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. C. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. Knowledge alone can save the human race from another dark age. All of these lessons, past and future, have but one dominant purpose. That purpose is to give you the knowledge you need to live gloriously and abundantly as an individual unit of creation, and to live collectively, in peace and happiness with all other human units of creation. These lessons act as a science of life, or a science of human relations, for their supreme purpose is to give all mankind knowledge of how to live together gloriously, and abundantly, in peace and happiness. Man has never yet had that knowledge. The time has come when the human race must have that knowledge and put it into practice, for the world is now in grave danger because of long practice of a cosmically criminal system of human relations which has bred hate and fear into the very warp and woof of the race and made every man the enemy of every other man. Once again the world is confronted with a swift plunge into long centuries of dark ages. The human race is on its downward road to mass slavery, which 539 Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 540, is the first step toward that degradation and degeneracy too horrible to describe which swallowed mankind from the 5th to the 12th centuries. The descent of man toward oblivion has increased with alarming acceleration of speed for 50 years. It will increase its speed until the human race is blotted out by the dehumanization process begun by the new kind of enemy and a new kind of war which he does not understand. It is undermining the moral fiber of the human race so quickly, however, and so insidiously, that he may be too weak to cope with it when he at last does comprehend it. It can be stopped, however, when the cause of it is comprehended and man has become enlightened with new knowledge needed for the transformation of all mankind. That new knowledge is here. God sent it to you in his message to man, which has been partly recorded in the divine Iliad and these lessons. You have read the miracle of how the message was sent to you in lesson number 7. You can save the world from another deep plunge into chaos if you learn God's way of life and put it into practice in time, for you have but very little time. You have but 9 years. 71b2 Terrell T1F1H1C 11CTS1R7N FF44 11,467/T/7,4Z and 29YEA. The end of 19 to 513 year LG2. I put the ENSRA system of human relations into reverse by an organized educational process. Alright, the next 7 years will be required to gain strength from the mighty power of universal law, which will then work with you instead of against. By .1960 the world will see the dawn of a new day in its human relations. 1 If universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 541, 14. 3 Vivalit Retail. The world takes heed of God's saving message otherwise it will be too late. From 1953 to 1960 is the crucial period which will decide the destiny of man, and the decision is man's. Mid-T, VA, 1. T7. EA%. 43 tons, JRR. 4,7,1.1. I. L.1424, V, et.o. 1,S_4. X 142-4. We must make crystal clear to you why we have but 9 years. The cause of the fall of man 4, 1 apostrophe I colon, 44, 0.1, 6Z. 4a, 2 semicolon ig, dash it is not war between nations that is causing man's fall. War is T cause, it is effect. The cause lies in man. Man is divided against himself. He is at war with himself. Man is the enemy of man, every man, everywhere, and always has been. He has never had a slightest inkling of the meaning of universal brotherhood, nor that the golden rule is nature's inviolate and inexorable law. Man has been the prey of man from the beginning and still is. Because every man made every other man fear him, he has built a world of fear and hate which always has been and still is. Love has not yet entered the world. Love is law, and law has never yet entered the world. Man has made his own law in violation of God's law. Love means balance and unity. The whole world is disunited. Man is disunited. Every element of man's human relations is disunited: his industry, his government, ideology, religion, education, language, race and culture. Every institution which man ever built is divided against itself, just as every man who built it is divided against all other selves, man against man, nation against nation. The world has never yet known peace. War has always been the basis of human relations the world over. War of man against man and war of man against law, man-made law and nature's law. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 542. War is universal. War between man and man is not local, nor is it national, nor is it cyclic or periodic, with intervals of peace. War between man and man is continuous. It began when man brought his might over right methods from the jungle into his new stage of unfolding as consciousness dawned in him. There never have been intervals of peace without fear. There have been but truces between wars of nations, and between wars of men and their dealings with other men. These two have been but truces heavy with fear. There never has been peace between nation or neighbor where nations could fearlessly disarm, or neighbors could tirelessly unlock their doors, or cities could withdraw their police. Fear of criminal aggression has kept nations heavily armed, cities heavily policed and neighbors' doors securely locked. Fear of hunger and insecurity has bred anarchy, Nazism, communism, and Hitler Mussolini Stalin leaders of hate. Fear bred greed, and greed divided the world of man into master and slave, ruler and subject, aristocrat and commoner, feudal lord and serf, rich and poor, exploiter and exploited, landlord and tenant, capital and labor. A disunited world divided against itself. That is what war is, the effect of fear. There is no time in human history when there has been a cessation of war, nor freedom from fear of war. Man is destroying. Himself nature is now destroying man for man's defiance of natural law. Nature Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 543 never punishes. She but gives in kind for that which is given. Man has given hate and fear to man, and nature has given hate and fear back to him. Man has always made war to destroy, enslave, exploit or take that which is the possession of other men, whether it be his life, freedom, love, happiness or security. Might over right has always been the sole basis of his dealings with other men. All of man's empires have been built that way, in violation of God's law, and God's law is now dismembering every empire that man has ever built, for God's law fulfills man's desire by giving back to him that which he gave. Man made war, and nature's law is giving it back to him in kind, and in equal measure, just as nature's law gives love back in equal measure when love is given. 11. For all through this whole series of lessons you have full explanation of nature's law, but it will be well for you to begin again at lesson 1 and review them concentratively, and meditate upon them decentratively, so your knowledge will give you greater comprehension of what is happening to the world of man. Do this, for you are the seed which will save man from his own self-suicide. Carefully restudy lessons number 15 to 29 to 30 and 31. The cosmic pendulum swings the other way. People who are fearing the probability of another world war are thinking of a war of guns, bombs, battleships and marching men. Tradition and habit have made them think that way. Such people are watching for the approach of an enemy from outside our borders. While KO12/11 fly the enemy TRT not come that way, nor he come with guns. The NMA Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 544 is already here in every country of the free world. DZS4A47:Rama:4 It is for fanatical hate, deep hatred in the heart of the slave who has arisen to slay his master. The world divided unto itself, half master half slave, cannot stand. 7. 47 There has never been any other kind of world. Call it lord and serf, conqueror and conquered, rich and poor, exploiter and exploited, privileged and underprivileged, or employer and employee, it makes no difference. All are master and slave when the interchange between the two is unbalanced. When interchange between the two opposites is equal, they are then mates, and their interchange gives power to each equally instead of to one of the pair unequally. Both are enriched instead of both being impoverished. Under nature's law of universal brotherhood of man, the cosmic pendulum swings both ways. The power wielded by the master for centuries generates hatred of equal power in the slave. The cosmic pendulum then swings the other way to balance the action of inhumanity to man with its equal reaction of inhumanity to man. That is what is happening in the world today. This war, which has already been raging for years, is not a war of nation against nation to build greater empires. It is a war of man against man within the borders of every nation. It is a war of hate in man. Hate risen from the dead to give hate back to man to degrade him completely. The human race is now reaping the whirlwind. Natural law is now swiftly giving back to world conquerors the agony which they gave to the dead whom they have conquered by the sword. The dead are universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 545 Arising, and behold, the dead are swiftly advancing toward the living. And in the hand of the mighty dead is the same sword with which the dead were slain. All the atom bombs in the world will not reach the enemy which now awaits to destroy the destroyer of man, for it is not man who is the enemy, nor is it nations of men. The new insidious enemy is hate, hate and dehumanized man who waits and works while he waits to dehumanize you. Sits with you in seeming friendship, waiting, plotting, hating. Sits in your office, working against you in your government, stealing its secrets, opening doors for your enemies and closing them for your friends. Equals in your church, your home, your labor union, your club, undermining, destroying, lying, vilifying, stealing, saying yes and doing no, practicing sabotage, treachery, treason. You do not know this enemy whom you are feeding, coddling, patronizing, supporting and protecting in his right of free speech, even though his speech tells you plainly that his aim and purpose is to overthrow your nation's freedom and enslave you behind his iron curtain. It is difficult for Christian people to understand the power of hate which denies God and ridicules good, but that power is strong. It is the power of might over right which the free half of the world used to enslave the other half. It is the same power which the enslaved half is now using against its conqueror, to first enslave, then dehumanize until no semblance of divinity will be left in the human race. You have had enough examples of that dehumanizing process which is awaiting you and all mankind in the dozens of trials of innocent men accused. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 546, of hideous crimes who admitted their guilt, and believed in it, after having been given but a few weeks of that soul-deadening process. The whole world is familiar with the workings of this Russian Inquisition, with high prelates of the powerful Catholic Church, such as Cardinal Mindzinski. No one dreamed, however, that hate in man was so strong that it could force the leading clergy of Hungary to swear allegiance to the monster of hate who starved millions of his own people to serve the ends of hate. This not only happened, however, but these Christian priests were forced to disavow their allegiance to the Vatican by tortures far more brutal than those of the Spanish Inquisition. Such amazing happenings should awaken the world to the methods of an enemy which does not use guns to conquer with. When hate is so strong an armament that it exhibits greater power over loyal subjects of the Vatican than the power of the Vatican itself, and the whole world appeases hate rather than meet it, it is time that we cease worrying about approaching armies which will probably never come, and give deep thought to the one and only kind of armament which will dissolve that hate, a kind of armament which we are now plentifully supplied with but will not have 9 years from now. The explanation of this statement will follow in Lesson 36. Why is it that the plan of this enemy who thus waits is not plainly seen by every man? He is here in the free world awaiting to enslave you and to then dehumanize you. And he will succeed here as he is succeeding everywhere, unless we render him powerless through universal law working with us when we know how to work with it by a reversal of the world system of human universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 547. Relations which cause this world tragedy. The free world is disappearing. The slave world is swallowing it up. Free nation after free nation is being enslaved behind the iron curtain of dehumanizing men. The fable of the master and the slave civilization of man's making is like unto the fable of the master and his servant who were cast upon a lonely island in the tropic seas. The master bade his servant build for him a shelter high above the sands to be safe from the seas. And the servant built it for him, filled it with comforts, soft moss for his bed and great palm fronds for shade. The servant hunted, and fished, and cooked and did other heavy labors from dawn to dark, till he dropped from weariness in the sands where he slept, for his master gave him no time to make a bed for himself, so great were the master's needs. Many a night was there when the servant shivered in the cold of the night, and the wet of the storms and discontent grew in his heart, for joy had gone out of him. One black night a great storm lashed the seas over his bed on the sands. Miserable from cold and wet, he listened to the full breathing of his master asleep in comfort, not knowing the storm. Discontent flamed to anger, anger to fury, and the servant went up unto the master, threw him into the sea, and took his master's bed. The ending of this story foretells the ending of the story of our present epoch, unless the master serve also in helping the servant to build a better bed on higher ground, where he is equally safe from life's storms. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 548. It is time that we comprehend the cause of this tragedy which is destroying man's free world. To better comprehend it, let us look back 50 years to what the world then was, and then look forward again to realize the great speed of the dehumanizing process, when once man begins his downward plunge from high pinnacles. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, S.C. D. and Lau Russell. Lesson number 34. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. The Rise and Fall of Man. These tighter 6 lessons are especially devoted to making you fully comprehend the cause of the periodic rise and fall of man, as an individual, a nation, or a whole civilization. They are also devoted to giving you the knowledge needed for rising to great heights with such stability that you will not fall. We have never yet known the law of nature which governs our rising and falling. We have not been able to command or obey that law because we have not known it. We have suffered the pains, aches, disasters, and tragedies of disobedience to nature's law because of our ignorance of it. That is why we rise only so far, individually or collectively, before we. The Dark Ages to the heights of 1900 consumed 7 centuries of great effort. The fall of man to another dark age will take but craft 5 century. Life is a series of experiences lived in the dark of ignorance while seeking the light of all. When your little successes become failures from lack of knowledge of 549. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 550. Goddess law which controls all structure, a mousetrap which you are making, a monument or a mighty 5-span bridge, you recover quickly and try it again. If you rise to great heights without knowledge and application of nature's law of balance, and fall to equally great depths as a consequence, you may not recover for many years of tragic suffering. The Empire State Building, the Pyramids of Giza, or the Washington Monument will endure. They were erected with knowledge of the law of balance which equalizes all stresses, strains and tensions so that none of these exist. The law of balance voids them, because there is not 1 ounce of weight on one side of the equators which is not equally balanced on the other side. The Leaning Tower of Pisa cannot endure. It violates the law of balance. That violation not only creates stresses, strains and tensions, but each fraction of an inch more of leaning, or of adding to its height, multiplies them swiftly. AQ 44-7, Fokale Civilization OF.11:31 Theism possible. We cannot have a unified civilization because we have never had a balanced system of human relations, which will alone unify man. Man can never be unified if the universal brotherhood of man principle is violated by unbalanced relations between men. Mankind has always been divided into 2 unequal classes in which the essential values of life are taken by one class from the other. Disunity exists in all departments of life because of that division. Discontent, enmity and hatred of all human units which make up the universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 551. Structure of our civilization also exists because of it. Man is now being destroyed by the very empires which he built for his glorification. The slave will always become the master. The commoner will always overthrow the throne. It would be enlightening to read the law in this respect, as given to man in the message of the divine Iliad. We quote from this the following: love of self, or nation of selves, turns neighbor against neighbor, and nation against nation. Self-love breeds hate and sows its seed in all the winds to blow where'er it will. Wherefore say I, love of neighbor for neighbor, or nation for nation, unites all men as one. Serve first thy brother. Hurt first thyself rather than thy neighbor. Gain naught from him unbalanced by thy giving. Protect thou the weak with thy strength. For if thou use thy strength against him, his weakness will prevail against thee, and thy strength will avail thee naught. This law is being fulfilled throughout the world today. The slave has arisen against the master. The oppressed have arisen against their oppressors. Monarchs have been unseated from many thrones. Russian peasants have killed their czar. Labor has arisen against its exploiters. Conquered nations have thrown off their yokes, and conquerors are begging bread from other nations. In unity lies the strength of all the cosmos, while disunity disintegrates great empires in the homes of men. A united civilization is possible only when human relations are balanced in all transactions which have to do with the distribution of the values of life which all men persistently and constantly seek. Those essential values can never be taken by force for distribution to universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 552. Conquerors. The universal law of rhythmic balanced interchange will not allow it. They can be acquired only by giving and love. We have built our now toppling civilization that way. Why should we expect it to endure? Love is the foundation upon which all balanced structures are created. The empire state building can sway rhythmically in the winds of earth without harming it. But the vibrations caused by the winds and cyclones of man's wars are shaking man's growing structure with increasing violence and increasing danger. That is why civilizations fall so much more quickly than they rise. And that is also the reason why it is so much harder to shore up the falling structure of man when it has fallen as far as it already has, and will be impossible to save after socialization and nationalization of free enterprise and industry has rendered this one greatest balancing force of the world impotent. The complete impotence of industry and free enterprise is on its inevitable way. The colossal disaster which is now threatening the utter ruin of our present civilization is the effect of a cause which is thoroughly explainable and remediable when we know the cause and have sufficient power left in us to invalidate the effect which we still have. In the previous lessons you have been learning the law, and in these 4 lessons we will apply it to our present threat of dissolution. To exemplify the workings of the law we will describe the methods employed by man in building his world up to its high pinnacle reached in 1900. 7 centuries were consumed by man to reborn his world from the dark 7th-century period of his last great fall. He has fallen farther in 50 years. Universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 553. Then he rose in 7 centuries and will have disappeared into oblivion in another 40 years unless he becomes sufficiently transformed by the renewing of his mind in time to prevent it. the essentials for an enduring civilization. Before describing the methods employed in building our present civilization, we will restate the principles given to the world by the great teachers of the ages, including the new teachings of the divine Iliad message. It has been realized that these teachings have been truths, just as the golden rule is truth. That which has not been realized is that these truths are ... 1 not just abstract statements, but law, inexorable law, which must not be violated without tragic reaction upon him who violates them. Even though these essentials are conceded to be truths, they are not comprehended scientifically in relation to the workings of God's electric universe. Even though we have known these truths, we have not put them into practice. In fact, the reverse has been the general practice. It gains us nothing to repeat truths, even if we do concede them to be truths, unless we sufficiently understand their power to lift us to great heights by practicing them in our human relations for equals. That is why all of these essential truths have been summed up into the simple words of God's one law of rhythmic balanced interchange between all pairs of opposites and every transaction in nature. It is for the scientific explanation and comprehension of universal law by means of which all mankind is controlled, that these lessons are written, in order that we may find an enduring way of life for our human relations. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 554, which we can live while working with the law, instead of against it. The foundation of God's universe is love, balance, unity. The expression of love, balance and unity in nature is in giving and re-giving equally. Nature never takes. Man cannot take happiness or love. He can only give it. God's law gives an equal measure to that which is given. To him who takes from another that which has not been given, an equal measure shall be taken from him. He who takes another's happiness for himself shall find himself possessed of an agony which he can ne'er lay down, for it will follow him unto the end of time. 01,0 Ziatir, he who at 7s another hurts himself only. No man has power to hurt until no man can be hurt. Until he himself accepts the hurt of another and takes it into him. The hurt of any man is the hurt of every man. Blessings extended to any man bless all men. He who desireth riches must first give riches. He who would be a leader of men must first serve men. He who desireth a throne must first enthrone all other men. 11. He who would sell much to his neighbor must give him that with which to buy. Poor neighbors cannot buy. See to it that your neighbor is not poor. 12. The greatest asset of man is man. The wealth of any man is dependent upon the wealth of every other man. Abundance for one is impossible in an impoverished world. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 555. 13. The heavens give to the earth of its rains, and the earth gives of its abundance to the heavens equally. That is what love means. The withholding of rain creates a desert and a cloudless sky. The seed gives the whole of the tree to the heavens, and the heavens give the whole of it back to the earth equally. When the interchange of givings and re-givings between heavens and earths are equal, they repeat each other eternally. Such transactions in nature are eternally repetitive. They continue on forever. When the human race learns how to give and re-give equally, each will be enriched. He who withholds that which he should give to another impoverishes both himself and the other. Every transaction between humans generates either one of two opposing forces. One is goodwill and the other is ill will. Goodwill will build you to a mighty power, and ill will eventually destroy you. Both are yours to choose from. The decision is yours. History is repeating itself. No civilization can exist part free and part slave. In defiance of this indisputable fact, man has built a civilization which is part free and part slave. We have never had any other kind of civilization. It has always been that way. There has always been a division of man. There has always been the conqueror and the conquered, the master and slave, the ruler and the ruled, the oppressor and the oppressed. There has never been content nor unity. There has been only discontent and disunity. In the part-free part-slave state, the master can be master for only one universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 556 _ swing of the cosmic pendulum. The slave will then be conqueror and the ruler will be enslaved, or worse. That is law, inexorable law. All down the ages it has always been that way, and we even see it happening right now, but we have not yet learned the cruel lesson of it. Consider the high point of culture in Athens in the days of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Phidias and other great philosophers, sculptors and architects who gave the world its classics for later generations to emulate, and built the most beautiful city in the world. If anyone of that period prophesied that such a high culture would be utterly blotted out, it would cause but a momentary laugh. Yet it was blotted out utterly and completely. Athens had 40,000 free men and 200,000 slaves, including concubines who had been free women. Concubine slaves conquered Athenian free men not with swords, for nature reacts in many ways. Miscegnation conquered Athens. Misceg / and homosexuality weakened that glorious race which gave so much beauty to the world. And so it has been down through all human history, from the fall of Babylon, through ancient and medieval history to the French, American and Russian revolutions, of modern times in which the oppressed rose against their oppressors and slew them with their own swords to become free, so that they themselves could become oppressors. We, ourselves, were not at all concerned when Oswald Spengler warned us of what would happen to this civilization in his book entitled The Decline Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 557 of the West. The decline which has already happened in 50 years is far greater than that which he prophesied, and it has embraced the world, not alone the West. Our fool's paradise. 50 years of accelerating world degeneracy. During the last 50 years a part of the world has degenerated to a lower level than it had arisen in 600 years. The tortures of the Inquisition and the trials of heretics during the 13th century were far more humane than the tortures of the Russian Inquisition of today, and of the steam chambers which boiled hundreds of thousands of human beings alive only yesterday. In the Middle Ages the victims of torture for heresy had some protection from the law. Their tortures were prescribed and limited to the body. Very often the accused were liberated and their confiscated properties restored. Not so with the victims of the Russian Inquisition. The tortures inflicted upon them are far greater than ever recorded in world history, for they not only torture the body but dehumanize the spirit of man by demoniacal attacks upon the consciousness, which alone has given to man the awareness of the spirit which centers him. Moreover, the victims of Russia's Inquisition have no prescribed limits to their tortures. They are not even accused and given the right of recourse. 4.1 All. They are merely taken from their homes by thousands and, perhaps, never again heard from. This is the kind of world we are living in today, not centuries ago. We cannot brush it aside by saying that this happened centuries ago, and universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 558-U- could not happen in this highly civilized world. Nor can we say that this happened on the other side of the world and could not happen here. It is a scientific fact that everything which happens anywhere happens everywhere. You can prove this by tuning your radio in on London or Iceland. And you know that it is factual, but you do not realize that any trend of the human race which manifests its nature anywhere upon the globe is as certain to reach you, and your children, and your neighbor, as Paris fashions will surely reach New York. What are we doing about it? We are doing nothing which is effectual, for we do not know how to meet it. The divine Iliad message is to give you the knowledge of how to meet it. These lessons are giving you the comprehension of how to effectually meet it. You can meet it only by reversing your actions which are the cause of it. It is waste time or among countless little peace groups, or equals as it gar millions to pray to God to stop wars which men are making. Wars between nations are not man's whole troubles. They are but one phase of the rapid degeneracy which man is bringing upon himself. Man alone can stop his wars the very moment he stops making wars. If you want to go to New York from Chicago, you do not head west and pray to God to set you down in New York. You stop going west and go east. Nor do you expect wheat when you sow brambles. God fulfills the law. He gives what you desire when you work with Him to fulfill your desire. It is time to stop thinking of wars with nations and of the guns and atom bombs needed to stop those wars, which will stop of themselves if we stop universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 559. Making other wars between man against man, and neighbor against neighbor. 7. 44.49 tons and t.l. These are the wars which are sending the human race into oblivion. These are the real dangers which we do not heed while spending billions for dangers which would dissolve like ice in the sun if we removed the real dangers which are causing these wars. The real dangers of man. Let us consider some of the real dangers which are creeping unnoticed upon the human race, for which we are providing no armament. The following are some of them. Fear. Fear to do the right thing because it might cost us something. We do not want another war. So we appease. We compromise with righteousness. We do not want to lose the lands which we stole by confiscation or conquest. So we trade with the enemy and exchange ambassadors. The world's greatest danger today is fear. Fear has lowered the morale of the free world. So we invite that which we fear to come to us. We are afraid to do the right thing which will prevent the things we fear from coming to us. And that very fear is bringing them to us. Our greatest national need is courage. Discontent arising from disunity. Discontent breeds a dangerous restlessness in the human race which manifests itself in a desire to overthrow the cause of discontentment. Millions of our own people are dangerously discontented, and justifiably so. Class disunity is the basic cause of the tremendous discontent of today. Lack of a feeling of security in the discontented is making our valued workers easy prey for communist propaganda. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 560, which stresses the overthrow of the upper class and confiscation of their wealth for division among the discontented. Labor unions are the direct effect of discontent. Strikes and limitation of production by workers have grown out of discontent. 1-3. Fifth column and left-wing infiltration. The entire structure of our world civilization is rapidly being undermined by human termites which gnaw at our foundations to overthrow our freedom. Our weakness is in granting them the rights of a political party when they allegedly are trying to destroy our way of life. They are as much an enemy as those enemies who bear guns. We defend ourselves against enemies with guns, and coddle those more dangerous ones who do not bear such an evidence of enmity as guns do. The threat of freedom of person and of free enterprise through the gradual absorption of personal rights and the siphoning of the people's earnings by centralized government. The reversal of the relation of man to state. We are far on the road to becoming puppets of the state with all of our movements and actions dictated by the state. England is much farther on that road than America. Its people are fast losing their freedom. The dole is being used in England for political purposes. It not only degenerates the worker but kills incentive in him, and desire for work. The threat of bureaucracy and the dole in America. The trend of all governments is in the direction of dictatorship. The methods used to secure permanency of office by an individual or party is to get enough people on the payroll of a patron government either for services rendered, or for universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 561. The dole to ensure a voting majority. Bureaucracy is hamstringing industry and the dole is destroying tens of thousands of valuable contributors to our national welfare. National and local use of the dole for political purposes is a danger of incalculable magnitude. The increase of treason, disloyalty, greed, bribery and sabotage in our federal government, and in civil offices throughout the nation, and the general disregard of ethics. Since 1910 there has been a rapid growth toward moral degradation throughout the country, which is increasing so rapidly in power that its contagion is affecting the morals of the entire nation. This insidious poison must either be wiped out or its spread would destroy us even if we had no wars. The increase of crime because of its partnership with those who have sworn to protect us from it. Our entire nation could be taken over, and dominated by crime, if the growth is not soon checked. Likewise the glorification of crime is multiplying youth delinquents, which, in turn is multiplying crime in growing cycles. Increase of homosexuality and other sex perversions. Whenever luxury, idleness, and unbalanced conditions exist which encourage physical degeneracy, nature replies by multiplying the power of man to destroy himself, just as nature multiplies man's powers of regeneration when man works purposefully in tilling nature's soil. This danger to the world is a very grave threat to the whole race, not to just a small portion of it. Decline in world culture, and the decrease in producing genius. 50 years ago the art of the world was at a high standard. The English, universal law, natural science and philosophy page 562. French and American salons were rich with the works of the great artists who then lived to give beauty to the world. Today the art of the world is ugly. The degeneracy of much modern painting and sculpture, and in other arts, has its roots in the sex degeneracy of many of those who produce it. The dehumanization of part of the world has back of it the same cause which is degenerating the race culturally. That cause is sex perversion. Nature is E447 VM, taking a hand in giving back to man that which, gave to man. When man destroys himself, nature helps him fulfill his desire, for nature is purposeful and eliminates that which is not purposeful. It is time that we knew this in order that we may meet and check it by working with nature instead of against it. The day of judgment dawns in order that we may more fully comprehend the only way that greater depths of degradation may be spared the human race. It would be well to look ourselves squarely in the face. Let us see where we were 50 years ago, where we are now, and why we are now at the verge of a very deep chasm. The world was then divided into empires which had all been built by the sword. All were built up by conquest just as the ancient empires were built. The world sought peace, happiness, power and prosperity for itself by taking peace, happiness, power and prosperity from others, ignorant of the fact that everything which it had taken from others including their peace and happiness would be given back to the world in equal measure, life for life, agony for agony, in fulfillment of God's law of rhythmic balanced interchange. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 563. In all of nature's transactions, man is now reaping the harvest of that which he has sown. Great Britain was a great and powerful empire in 1900. She was a world power of first magnitude. She ruled the seas in many great nations like India, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and had other strongholds in countries which she had exploited such as China, Spain and Egypt. She was rich and prosperous beyond compute. Her titled class owned great estates and her power was seemingly invulnerable. Her people were conspicuously divided into two opposite classes called aristocrats and commoners. LA 5_5. Today England is on rations, impoverished, weak and humble, her empire breaking up, her best sons being killed, her titled class of aristocrats gradually being shorn of their ancient prestige, their estates being sold or confiscated, the freedom of her people gradually being restricted. India and Egypt have revolted. Iran has repudiated her rights. She is no longer a world power controlling world finance. Instead of that, she is a heavy borrower who acknowledgedly cannot pay her debts. Her morale is so low that she can, one with only great difficulty, raise but a semblance of that splendid courage to resist, which amazed the world at the time of the Dunkirk tragedy. All of this in 50 years. Why? Because her enemies all rose up against her and smote her. Why did England have enemies which smote her? Because England 44, the enemy of the countries which smote her. The United States was also rich and powerful. Its culture was at a high standard. It had built a great empire which reached from coast to coast. It universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 564 had no income tax and no worry about conscription. Today the United States is in debt for hundreds of billions. Incomes are being taxed to almost confiscation point. Hundreds of thousands of our best blood have been, and are being, killed. Its youth are being called to war, and mothers, who have before known war's agonies, are again preparing to face them. All of this in 50 years. Why? Because her enemies rose up against her to smite her. Why did the United States have enemies to smite her? Because she made enemies by being the enemy of other men. How did we make enemies of other men? Our empire began with a handful of men who came here to find freedom from persecution. These early American free men almost immediately began the persecution and slaughter of the free men whom they found here. They made enemies who, in turn, slaughtered them. We gradually slaughtered the entire race of Indians and kidnapped thousands of Africans to enslave, just as our savage ancestors did ages ago. We fought over 100 cruel and needless wars and killed hundreds of thousands of people whom we made our enemies by being their enemies. Consider France, the world center of art, with its great African and Indo-Chinese empire, Austria, and the glory of Vienna's music, Holland with its conquered East Indies, Belgium, with its blood-bought Congo wealth. Germany, Italy, Tsarist Russia and other countries, which we considered impregnable only 50 years ago. Where are these powerful countries today? Where are their kings who universal law, natural science and philosophy page 565 then sat upon seemingly secure thrones? Where, even, are the thrones? Where is the powerful Tsar of all the Russias, who condemned hundreds of thousands of his own people to Siberian exile? He and his family were slaughtered by enemies whom they had made by being their enemies. The great unlearned lesson: all empires were built with hate and fear. The building of them bred D1 hate and fear. Cruelty and brutality have never yet made friends, for love alone makes friends, and love has not yet come into the world. In all of the empire building of man, where is there love anywhere in its human relations? God's law always works. Whatever seed you sow you harvest in kind, multiplied as seed always multiplies. Every nation made enemies by being enemies. We fear man today because we made him fear us yesterday. The persecuted of the world have risen to smite their persecutors. England's degradation of China by the forced sale of opium upheld by two cruel wars, and the confiscation of Hong Kong, now England's degradation. She now fears the enemy she made to fear her, and she is humbling herself mightily in fear of losing Hong Kong and other Asiatic holdings. Which she will lose. Fork 7 workers Sarad Kurs for little wages have demanded a dole, and the master is doing the work of the serf in his own hour while being taxed to pay the serf. Laborers have long ago risen against masters to demand a share in that which they produce. Universal law, natural science and philosophy page 566-S. The Negro race whom we enslaved, are now counting the days when their outnumbering votes will enslave their masters, and the beginning of the mongrelization of the white race by intermarriage is now bringing a new worry into both races, both white and colored both being equally hurt. Sell your goods to your neighbor, the business world of 1900 said. Let the perched sir beware, but sell your goods. Represent them as honestly as you can, but sell your goods. You cannot be honest and get rich, so employ the law to protect you from the law. Forget altruism, morals, ethics. You must survive. Foreclose on the widow orphan. They are your prey. Business is business. You must look out for yourself. Let others look out for themselves. You are not your brother's keeper. That was our business policy up to the year 1925. It has modified a little since then, but where, in that policy, is there the slightest iota of the universal brotherhood of man principle, or of love itself, upon which the universe is founded? Consider our world policy of empire building. Wherein it is there the slightest indication of the love ye one another principle, without which civilization cannot hold together? Peduquia we will put this Joran Kipluk into words. Try to find any expression of love in them. You will not find it. Why, therefore, need we be astonished if civilization disintegrates to a point beyond our control, a point which we surely will reach 9 years from now, only 9 short years, unless we reverse our human relations? Universal law, natural science and philosophy page 567. World empire building policy past and present. Build your empire. You need more land to expand your body. You need more wealth to make your body prosperous. You need more workers to save you from work. You need more possessions to make you rich, more rich. You need more leisure to become one of the ruling class which rules, but does not serve. Take other lands by the sword. Take lands from the heathen. They are weak and you are strong. You are enlightened, they are ignorant barbarians. Send missionaries to enlighten them, to save their souls from sin. Exploit them and pay but little, for they need but little. If they resist you, blow them from the cannon's mouth to teach them a lesson, as empire builders did when the sepoys rebelled. Let them know that you rule the world, that you are ruler of the lands and the seas. Enslave them if you need more workers for less wages. Whip them till they bleed if they slacken their work. Sell their wives and babes if they breed too fast. They are your property. You acquired them by conquest. You may do with them what you choose. Find new lands, new continents. Make them yours from coast to coast. Enslave their people or kill them. Kill the weak with your strength. Be strongly armed. The fittest alone survive. When they resist, and kill, show them no mercy. Make their lands yours alone. Do not share them. Conquer its peoples and destroy them. Divide also your own peoples into two classes. Have a ruling class and a working class. The workers must serve the rich to make the rich more rich. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 568. And if the workers are not sufficient, put their children into sweatshops to produce more goods for the rich. The obvious question: where in this outline of world policy can we find any trace of the golden rule which says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you"? Can you reasonably expect the God of love to look down upon such fiend one-ish cruelty and bless it? Or could you expect him to take the oppressor's '7 side as against the side of the oppressed? Why, then, these constant prayers which ask God to help us kill our fellow men who are all children of the one God? Why, instead, do we not learn that if we give love, we will be given love? When will we ever learn that the way to peace, happiness and prosperity is through love alone, and that the practice of hate will destroy us? Why not acknowledge now that we are still barbarians with a desire in us to unfold our spiritual natures in our perpetual search for peace and happiness? Man's spiritual nature is essentially good. He has not yet found his spiritual nature. For ages he has been living in the material body, fulfilling the demands of his sensed physical body. It is time that man be illumined with the light of his spiritual unity with God. The renaissance of man is dawning. Let us seek the light of man's new day by living in that light. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, S.C. D. and Lau Russell. Lesson number 35. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. Hard facts man must face or go and perish from the earth. Unity is the one great unlearned lesson of the ages. Unity of man has always been impossible in a world of fear and discontent where every man fears every other man as an enemy. Until man learns this one essential of collective human existence, every attempt to build a stable civilization will fail, as this present effort of the last 7 centuries is failing. Why have we never learned this lesson of unity and the universal brotherhood of man, which would have given the world a united civilization of contented people? We are now paying the price of world degeneration because we have not learned it. First, let us face squarely the cause of discontent in our human relations, which makes disunity unavoidable and unity impossible. Why do we have disunity in every department of our lives, in our homes? 569. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 570. In industry, in religion, in science, in government, and in education. It is because we have violated God's one law over and over again periodically ever since we emerged from the jungle. The reaction to our own actions is sending us back to the jungle. We cannot escape our return except by reversing those reactions. Universal law is inexorable. God, the creator of this universe, divided every unit of His creation into two. Each of these two are equal and opposite halves of the other. God issued but one command to all units, and all pairs of units of His creation. That one command is that every unit of His creation must give to its opposite and that opposites must give equally. Out of that one command came God's one law of love, which is that there must be a rhythmic balanced interchange between all pairs of opposites of every unit of creation. Nature gives to its opposite and is given equally. Nature never takes. The measure of giving is the measure which will be given. The earth gives to the heavens and the heavens give in equal measure. Man gives service to earth and earth gives product in equal measure. Man's abundance from earth's givings to man is the measure of man's abundant givings to earth. He who withholds his givings withholds also his givings. Earth gave man his body, and continues the gift. Man must give his body to earth in equal measure. This is law and violate law. Action and reaction are opposite and equal. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 571. The pendulum swings each way equally. A light shown into a mirror does not give more light, or less, than that which was given to it. The interchange is equal. One opposite of the divided pair balances its gift with its other opposite. The seller who gives less than he fairly should to his buyer does not add to his gain. He has but bred distrust which may lose for him many buyers. If he gives more than is expected of him, more will be given. If man breathes fully out as his gift to space, space will give equally, but if man withholds his breath, rather than give, it will weaken him, instead of strengthening. It is like the withholding of fuel to your car, which immediately responds by withholding speed in equal measure. Compression and expansion are equal and opposite. It is impossible to compress without expanding equally, nor can you heat without cooling. The wealth and power of man is the measure of what he has given in love in equal measure. No more. No less. No man has more than he has given, nor can he possess more. He who takes from another that which is not given in love and thinks himself enriched by it will find himself accursed. It will fester in him until he becomes a stench unto himself and to all men. That which is law for one man is law for a world of men. If waves of the ocean give and give to each other equally, they will repeat each other rhythmically. If slanting sands of shore unbalance their equal interchange, the rhythm of their repetition ceases, and waves break upon the sands and cease to be. Likewise, when men deal with other men equally, they repeat their dealings. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 572. Ceaselessly in the rhythm which is the measure of their interchangings. When man unbalances his dealings with other men, and gives less than is expected of him, he is taking that which has not been given to him in love. He has destroyed the rhythm of endless repetition which would eternal light bless him, and will break himself as surely as unbalanced waves break upon ocean's sands. The supreme lesson of life is to learn how to give with love. There is naught else to learn. Man who but takes belongs to the jungle. No matter how far he climbs away from it, he still belongs to the jungle, where self-survival is man's first thought. Nor will he who takes climb far before he, himself, will condemn himself to fall from the heights of his climbing. Someday, In his many upward climbings, man will know that an individual independent life is impossible, that every man is an interdependent unit of an interdependent whole, that each man is as dependent upon every other man as each cell of his body is dependent upon every other cell, and that the hurt of any man on earth is the hurt of every other man. All men are one. All are united by invisible threads of light. Man is not local or separable. He is universal degrees. When a civilization learns these lessons, it will then know the meaning of the universal brotherhood of man. When man finally recognizes this, his civilization will endure, but not until. God said, "All men will come to me in due time, but theirs is the agony of awaiting." From the Divine Iliad. We see ourselves face to face. We have built our unstable civilization by dividing the peoples of the earth. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 573 _ into two unequal classes, and forced upon these two classes an inequality of 4i, interchange in all of life's values. This inequality of divided mankind has resulted in a disunited and discontented race of humans who hate and fear each other. There could be no other result than this disastrous warring civilization, because unequal interchange between all pairs of opposites which must interchange for each other's continuance, violates God's one law of love. God has no other law but that one. The universe is founded upon that one inexorable law. He who defies that law will, himself, be broken in the measure of his defiance of it. Disunity on the world-size scale causes wars on the world-size scale, but we have continuous wars everywhere, in every human relation, because of disunity arising from discontent in our small-scale human relations. Disunity in the home. The strength of a nation is the measure of love expressed in its homes. That which is true of a nation of homes is true of one home. Unity in the home is impossible without love given and re-given equally. A man who is master in his own home pays dearly for his assertion of supremacy by loss of that which he most values. A husband or wife who subtract from loyalty to each other, even by a thought, lowers the potential of the greatest source of power a man or woman can attain, which is possible only through balanced interchange. In countries where women have been suppressed, their progress has been retarded to a point where they stand almost still. Wherever any reforms have been made toward equalizing, the standards of their cultures have arisen proportionately. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 574. When you find a man or woman whose home is united, you will also find the strength of unity in all of their interests in life. As the home is, so is the nation. Disunity in industry. In industry we have divided the producer of goods into owner and worker unequally. Owners have exploited workers for selfish purposes. There can be no other result than the discontent and disunity which has caused the vast worker world to rise up and slay the world of owners who have taken unequally from the product of both. America has awakened to this fact, and has done much to counterbalance disunity between creators of ideas and producers of them, whom we have unfairly and unjustly termed capital and labor. This in its very essence divides man and stratifies him into a high superior level and a low inferior one. Creators are those who conceive ideas. Producers are those who give material bodies to ideas. Those men who produce necessities for other men should not be given a name which connotes ignominy, for work is service given. Work is noble, and nobility attaches to him, who thus serves man, in greater measure than to the titled aristocrat who does not serve him. We will talk at length about industry later, for it is destined thus severely if awakened in time, will be through the mighty power of a united industry working knowingly with God's inexorable universal law. Unified and balanced industry is the only national and international power which would be the strongest force in the world if its pairs of opposites became one, stronger than all the governments in the world which now seek, and plan, universal law, natural science and philosophy. Page 575. To overthrow free enterprise as loot for a discontented bureaucracy to create a new kind of slave world. We will expand this idea later in this lesson. We must look to industry, for it can be unified in time to save mankind while religion cannot. Religion is more disunited than any of the essential elements of life. A united world cannot grow out of a disunited one until dis-unity is voided. Disunity in religion. Religion has too many gods, too many creeds and doctrines which are a source of continual war between the followers of all of them. Man needs religion vitally, but it must be a unified religion which worships but one God, the God of love. Many of our disunited religions worship a god of fear and wrath and command its followers to be God-fearing men. These breed intolerance and the fear that they preach. In a world of love, hate cannot also be. From the divine Iliad. Religion can never be united as one until it has but one God, and until it replaces all of its unnatural creeds and doctrines with God's one law of love. We must become a nation of God-loving men, not God-fearing men. Why should man fear God from whom all of our blessings flow? Such teachings keep fear alive and breed war in all communities of men who walk many different roads on Sabbaths to find their different gods. We cannot, therefore, look to religion to save us from the chaos toward which we are heading. Nor can we look to government. Disunity in government. Government is divided unto itself into parties which have different ideal, universal law, natural science and philosophy. Page 576. C. SC. C. COCOCMCMCOEE CMCMECOTTC, ECOSCCCOCCECR, CMCCCO and different motives. Likewise the separate units of each party have different ideals and motives. A small minority of our governing body have patriotic ideas of a government for the people by the people. The large majority have forgotten the Washington and Jefferson ideals, and the higher seats in government have plainly in view a desire for dictatorial rule by subsidizing enough voters, through patronage, the dole and bureaucracy, to keep their ruling seats permanently. Government is, likewise, unbalanced because of its masculinity. The balance which comes from husband and wife working together with the equality which love alone gives, is lacking in government. The positive element, which desires to draw everything unto itself, is not balanced by the negative spiritual element, which desires to extend that which it is to others throughout the nation. Until the spiritual element, which is stronger in women, is added to government to balance the material element, we will always have the disunity which comes in every body where the man is supreme and woman is ignored. For that reason we cannot look to government to save civilization. Instead of that we must either change the present trend of government here immediately, or begin to look upon our government as our number one enemy, which can be rendered helpless in carrying out its present trend only by building a more powerful force to neutralize its growing power. War, and more wars, are helping government to siphon the earnings of its people into its treasury for its own selfish purpose, which is to rule the people for the government, instead of for the purpose of serving the people. When will the people see that the very taxes they pay are building a power to be used against them? Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 577. The effect of this is to divide the allegiance of officials to giving first allegiance to party and second to the people. When government grows to such huge proportions because of being nourished by huge war expenditures, this evil of a divided allegiance becomes a two-way Frankenstein which first destroys its creator and then itself. When will the scales be removed from man's eyes? Our government is now following this trend which has multiplied its own self-interests by intolerance, corruption and unethical practices. V4A4A are adding to the moral degeneracy of the whole nation. The word treason has lost its ominous meaning because so many varied degrees of treason are infiltrating through so many departments that committee after committee is being formed to investigate criminal charges against high officials. A century ago the country was stunned by the discovery of just one traitor. In RRLids. Today the whole country, including government, is honeycombed with known traitors whom we protect, and near traitors whom the law cannot touch, and we refuse to be shocked. Multiplicity of it has rendered us almost shock-proof to crimes in high office which would have had a volcanic effect in Washington's, or Jefferson's day. Cries of impeachment of the highest officials in the land no longer shock the nation. They are not even front-page news. Statesmen are becoming more rare as power politicians multiply so menacingly. Honorable men in office are more frequently resigning rather than either becoming tainted by the practices of government, or closing their eyes. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 578. Al. 0C7CJ.7 So as 0 La E0 0 E Ca 11 0 0 0 0 E plus 0 Palm P E to them. Likewise, men of high integrity are not so eagerly seeking office as they did in the days when office in government was a high honor attended with dignity which only the highly qualified could fulfill. Where is this dignity of office today? Where is the necessity for highly qualified men of unquestioned honor? Dignity has vanished from office. The least qualified are occupying high posts at high salaries. These are not needed for service to the people. They are needed for service to power politics, to bolster the plan of power politics, to render the people helpless against their ultimate rule. Immoral use of the power to tax is weakening the people and multiplying the power of government to enslave the people. ASEV equals E. Honorable investigators of crime in office are vilified, even crucified, while those whom they find guilty are whitewashed by political committees and highly paid propagandists appointed by power politics for that very purpose. Easy money for the discontented. The discontented are seeking bureaucratic jobs and the dole in government, and subsidies to earn more from not planting than by working to plant. These discontented ones forget that the security they seek will never come from the one master whom they must serve, to find only a false content. Security can never come to one who is dependent upon one master. Security and contentment can come only through interdependence of every man upon every other man. Communism is fanned by promises of security and contentment made by a master to an intended slave. Communists are building up a slave state of unprecedented power to deprive its victims of every freedom they are hoping to achieve. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 579. One step toward communism is socialism. We keep this country free from the socialist and communist trend for 9 years, and used that 9 years to unify astray upon the lines laid down in this chapter which conform to God's one law. The rest of the world will emulate our example gradually and help to reverse our present self-destructive system of human relations. This recital of trend in government is not made to criticize people and government. It is made solely to bring strongly home to you a realization of the inexorable workings of God's one law of rhythmic balanced interchange between the opposite halves of every unit of creation. A divided house cannot stand balanced between its two interchanging conditions. It is also written to demonstrate that unbalance multiplies at a terrific ratio, once it is given enough of an impetus. Corruption, for example, spreads its corruption to the honest who find their very survival threatened unless they either yield, or compromise by closing their eyes to it all. This multiplication of speed toward degeneracy is just one more of the accumulating causes of our rapid world plunge toward chaos. 7 devastating world catastrophes in 50 years. If you give deep thought to these facts, you will realize that each great catastrophe of the nation has increased the governmental power to tax, and has weakened the power of industry and free enterprise through bureaucratic interference by multiplying form-filling red tape. There have been 7 of these major catastrophes in 7-year periods for half a century. Each one has weakened the power of the people and has universal law, natural science and philosophy page 580. Each one strengthened the power of government to tax until freedom and security for the people is on the verge of disappearing into a tyrannical despotism. We will enumerate these 7. 1. The Panic of 1907 was worldwide and left each country staggering. This was World War No. 1. It so impoverished this nation that the Constitution was amended to make it possible to tax the incomes of all people. Thus began the fall of man. 2. World War No. 2 of 1914. The war with Germany was a war of a discontented empire builder who desired to redistribute the loot of other empire builders. Emperor William resented the cramped quarters which the greed of other conquerors had forced his growing nation to occupy, and followed the familiar pattern of empire builders by drawing his sword. The aggressor did not alone make that war. The defenders made it with him equally. War savings bonds and increased debt limit, with increased income taxes, impoverished the people, but multiplied the cost of government as well as increasing its bureaucratic powers. By 1921 the world was at a very low level of morale. The fall of man accelerated its speed. 3. World War No. 3. The War of Greed of 1921. All of man's wars are based upon taking. There could be no war based upon giving. Wars of taking other people's lands by force are fought with guns. The War of 1921 to 1928 was fought with money to take other people's money. It was a gambler's war, a get-rich-quick without giving service war. It was a war of man versus gold to make gold do for man that which it could not do. The nation went mad in wild speculation and stock manipulation in while universal law, natural science and philosophy page 581 Street, land speculation in Florida, and the building of financial mirages of no substance, everywhere. Its tragic collapse in 1928 was an avalanche which carried falling man with it into deeper depths. 4. World War No. 4 of 1928. The slave awakens to slay his master. He searches for a demon to lead him and finds him in Hitler. In the thunder of the avalanche which drowned out the fall of billions of dollars of phantom wealth, Another slave of man arose to slay its master. It started a war of its own, the war of gold versus man. Gold, which man had enslaved for centuries, arose to enslave man with shackles stronger than man can forge, or sever. Man has for so long abused the use of gold that he is now helpless in its grasp. Man can no longer master gold. We tried it by burying it in a mountain. England tried it by going off the gold standard. Banks tried it by bolting their doors. The world writhed in its tentacles and will still writhe until we find that God's one law works with us. If we deal with gold on an equal basis as strongly as it has worked against us for working against it unequally, why have men been so blind that they could see the ominous portent of those long years since 1914, during which we so naively believed we were fighting wars to end wars to preserve democracy and the freedom of man? Why could we not see that the empire builders who fought for the preservation of their ill-gotten empires were working with the slave world to help it enslave its conquerors? Why could not we who fought see that we were helping to destroy one slave leader by helping to create another one to whom we gave shackles to bind us? Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 582-____. Why could we not also see that we who fought were nurturing slave leaders in our own respective countries by giving them the means to create self-perpetuating oligarchies with hundreds of thousands of bureaucratic slave drivers, who have already begun to use their whips in your office and in the offices of your neighbors? You have not yet felt its sting in your flesh as you will when their votes render you impotent. In 2 more presidential elections bureaucrats can elect whomsoever they choose. It is then that you will feel the sting of their lashes deep into your flesh. It is then that you will awaken to the fact that your freedom is gone and your slavery has begun. But it will be too late. Do you realize how well trained to use the whip are the slave drivers of Iron Curtain countries? Do you realize that they themselves must have all kindness drained from them until they become sadist brutes? These are well trained to dehumanize, and they must be inhuman to dehumanize. When this country is behind the Iron Curtain, you will know how thousands upon thousands of free men just like you have lost all awareness of their souls. If you choose to take this lightly, as though it could not happen here, give thought to the fact that these many bureaucratic slave drivers of the future held a balance of power in the last election and dutifully elected a hand which fed them. We are creating a political machine to crush us instead of a government to serve us. Should we not awaken from our lethargy while there is yet time? Shall we continue the suicidal policy of doing too little, too late? From 1928 to 1935 were the blind years of man. He fell far toward the dark, for he could not see his way, and no hand guided him. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 583. World War No. 5, from 1935 to 1941. The slave strikes at his master. He grows stronger. We do business as usual. He threatens. We appease. Italy reaches into Africa for empire. We scold. Japan reaches into China. We plead. The world conqueror to be sees a bigger world conqueror awaiting to gather in his spoils and reaches out to slay him. We, the intended victims of the bigger one, slay the lesser one. Cities are leveled, millions killed, more millions tortured, burned alive. The world's in agony. Freedom loses. Slavery wins. Bureaucracy wins. Chaos draws nearer. World War No. 6. From 1941 to 1948. The war for autocracy, Did Pearl Harbor really surprise us? A hard blow for the people, but bureaucracy fattened and looked at its whips. Free men made money to pay for the wars. Everyone made money to pay for the wars. There is plenty of money whenever we have wars. Workers strike for more money while brothers die in agony and mothers' tears are dried from weeping. Autocratic powers are needed for the fighting of wars. More power is given freely with much faith. More money is needed for the fighting of wars. More money is given freely with much faith. More parolees are needed not to fight wars but to collect money and count money and spend money not needed for wars. And a great cry goes up into the high heavens calling out the death knell of freedom in the two familiar words tax, tax and tax until it hurts. Tax our incomes, tax our comings, and our goings. Tax our food and our clothing, and if we seek leisure tax us for that also, and withhold nothing from universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 584. Us which is not taxed and taxed and taxed. And another great cry calls out to warn against changing horses while crossing a stream, and we do not change horses again and again. We are a blind people without vision, without a leader whose inner vision would lead us safely to peaceful shores. And thousands of our own people are our deadly enemies. They consort with deadly enemies who sit at our table and eat of our sustenance. These enemies from another country do not come with guns, for if they did we would be justified in shooting them, so they carry on their enslaving process without guns. They have done over and over again in other countries which they enslaved without guns. When we, ourselves, are enslaved, we will have much time to condemn ourselves in concentration camps. Why not awaken now before it is too late? Darkness always deepens before the dawn. 7. World War No. 7. 1949 to 1956. The Cold War for oblivion. For years the free world has been nurturing the greatest enemy man has ever known, that enemy whose one desire is to subjugate the soul of man by taking God away from him and leaving him naught but the hopelessness of the dark and empty shell of man. Wo has for so long been groping his way out of the dark to seek the light. The free world saved the slave world so that its leader might rise to strike us in his own time and in his own way, a way which free men do not understand, even when free men fight to slay free men. My way of treachery, lies, deceit, iniquity deeper than man has yet known. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 585. This enemy did rise and strike in his own time and in his own way, and his way was the drawing of a veil over the face of man so that he could no longer see his way toward the light of his seeking. We call that veil the Iron Curtain. We call his kind of war the Cold War, for it is not fought with guns. One by one he is enshrouding free world countries with that veil and drawing them behind his iron curtain of bloodhound, fiend-protected boundaries. He does not fight with guns. He cannot fight with guns. He could not conquer Little Finland with guns. He would have been destroyed by Hitler's guns had we not saved him to conquer us. His own armies turned against him. They are awaiting a chance to again turn against him. There are enough of the discontented behind the Iron Curtain to destroy a leader if he fights with guns. He fights a cold war of intrigue and treachery to weaken the free world. He sows treachery among free men. By treachery he makes free men turn against free men, sell them out, as we sold out Czechoslovakia and China to weaken the free world. He undermines from within, as the termite undermines. He sows treachery to reap harvests of traitors who sell their own countries out. He weakens by inciting war outside his borders, but not within where his own might turn on him. Of that he is afraid, very much afraid. He fears disloyalty because he has not given loyalty. He has seen Hitler die in a cellar, and Mussolini hanged by his own, and spat upon. He is afraid to send armies into Yugoslavia for fear they will not return. For the same reason he is afraid to send planes over America lest they seek protection here and show his weakness to all the world. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 586-. He does not need to do these things, for he is conquering without them and we are helping him, for that is his way, and he awaits his own time to weaken us enough to draw the veil around all of the free world, one country at a time, as his termites work to undermine one country at a time. And we feed the termites while they work, for we fear only guns. We have never yet learned to fear treason, and treachery, and the power of veto. We will never surrender en masse, for we will not be allowed to. We are surrendering moment by moment, day by day. Do not say, God help us, God show us the way, for God has shown us the way. God has given us his full directions for saving the world, if we will but stop working against his one law and work with high, we will tell you his plan as he gave it in his message of the Divine Iliad. You must either listen to it or perish. There is no other way. God's law works. It never fails. Man cannot continue to work against it and escape its results. Therefore, we say, awaken and act. It is not yet too late. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, S.C. D. and Lau Russell. Lesson number 36. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. The remedy for world destruction and the dawn of a new day in human relations. Despair is not thy lot. 0 Man, thy lot is happiness, which is even now in thee when thou knowest me. Through knowing me shalt thou find strength in thy downfalling. From the very pit of darkness shalt thou arise to lighten me. Pray not that I crush the enemies of man to save them that cometh to me. For man himself destroyeth his own enemies through my law of unity, which make an all one through me. For behold, I am within all things centering them, and I am without all things controlling them. From the Divine Iliad. Take these words from God's message of the Divine Iliad into the depths of your heart and soul, for within them lies the great answer to man's 11th hour question. What can save us from world destruction? The world is in its present perilous condition because of the casual manner. 587. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 588, in which such vital principles of truth as, we are all one, the Golden Rule, the brotherhood of man, and unity have been taken, assuming that man's free will gave him choice of action in regard to them. You who have gone so far in your comprehension now know conclusively, through your scientific studies of the Divine Iliad teachings, that these seeming abstract statements constitute God's one inviolate law of love upon which the universe itself is founded. Coming down to hard facts, we must know that we are living in an orderly God-controlled universe of law where every man is as inexorably bound within fixed limitations as the planets are bound to definite paths in their orbits. Man has been taking his right of free will too much for granted. He does not realize that he has the right to choose his own actions, but universal law reacts upon him to give him back in kind that which he has given. Let us, therefore, cease breeding hate, fear and discontent through our unbalanced human relations and balance them by living the law of the brotherhood of man in our dealings with all men. There must be an immediate reversal of our present unfair and unethical basis of human relations, for in them is the seed of discontent which has made one half of mankind the mortal enemy of the other half, and made neighbor kill neighbor all down the ages in perpetual, ceaseless war. Man must stop taking and begin giving. He must stop killing and begin nurturing. And he must hurt first himself rather than his neighbor and exalt his neighbor first. Likewise, man must learn to serve and think not of being served. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 589. He must bring balance into his dealings with man. He has not yet discovered that he must balance his dealings with man, for he has not yet discovered man. Nor has he discovered his relation to man, nor the law which governs that relation. Nor has he discovered his inseparability from all other men nor the interdependence of all men upon each other, nor the impossibility of an individual existence with free will to do as he chooses in his dealings with man, nor that the hurt of any man is the hurt of all men, nor that he cannot hurt another man without hurting himself equally. In fact, man has not yet discovered man. Man must discover man. Naught else counts. The world of man must discover the value of every man to every other man, and base his relations with him upon the result of that discovery. He must cease placing highest value on product and place it upon man who creates product. He must discover that the greatest asset of man is man, not product, not money, nor power, nor position. Man's first need is man and the service of man and the interchange of service for service with man. Without the service of man there would be no product, nor power, nor wealth, nor position. Such interchange creates product and it creates abundance together with happiness, peace and prosperity. If such interchange is balanced, in accord with God's one law, if such interchange between men is not balanced, there will be a deduction from abundance, and from happiness, and from peace and prosperity equal in measure to the unbalanced interchange. Man must cease dividing men, ennobling one and debasing the other. One Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 590. Being master of the servant and the other the servant of the master, each one serves the other. Each one needs the service of the other. Each is enriched by the service of the other and would be equally impoverished by lack of it. This is law, inviolate law. Man must cease dividing work, exalting one forms degrading the other. He who degrades both work and worker to exalt himself and his own work, will himself do the degrading work of the degraded worker. This is law, inviolate law. It is the law of the golden rule, which he who violates is self-hurt. Witness its workings in every home. The servant has arisen to slay the mistress. There is no mistress, the mistress has slain the servant. There is no servant, the mistress and the servant have destroyed each other. Each is the other. They have become one. That is the law, and that is the way the law of the brotherhood of man works. The mistress can again have service when the value given by one is balanced by the other, but not while one exalts that which she gives and debases the other. The basic root of a balanced civilization, the very foundation of the living of life, lies in the desire of every man to give service to fulfill the needs of his neighbor. The very essence of glorious living lies in this principle, so you must fully understand it. You wonder why we do not complete the above paragraph by adding these words, so that his neighbor will give service to him to fulfill his needs. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 591. If we added these words we would be adding a motive, the giving of love - a selfish motive. There is no selfish motive in nature. There is no need for it. That also is law, for law itself compels an equal reaction to every action. Nature is a creation of love. There is no selfishness in love. Desire to give must be without motive other than desire to give. We desire that you comprehend this fully. Reread all of the previous lessons again and pause right here until you have reviewed all that we have written about balance in nature and the fulcrum and lever in the swinging pendulum, inequality of polarity in the solar system, or the electric wave, or gravitation and radiation, or compression and expansion of your car engine, or of your very in-breathing out-breathing sequences. Heaven does not give rains to earth because it desires gifts from earth. It gives solely because it has been given an abundance of itself and must give out from itself that which has been given to it to re-give. Likewise, earth does not give its forests to the heavens because it expects gifts of rains and payment thereof. Earth gives solely because it has been given an abundance of itself which it must give out to manifest itself, even as the composer genius must give out music without thought of compensation, for he would thus manifest himself if he were alone in the wilderness. There is naught in this creating universe which gives aught than the overabundance of itself which has first been given it. The sun gives of its light without motive other than giving of itself. God's one law of balanced interchange re-gives to the sun that which has been given by the sun, just as forests given by earth to heavens to manifest earth, are re-given by heavens to earth to manifest heavens. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 592. The unlearned lessons of man. The great lesson to learn of life is the need of giving out from the abundance of oneself in order to be ever abundant within oneself. Every man is a fount of living waters which must ever flow to keep them ever living. He who shuts off the fountains of his abundant self stagnates the living waters of his living self and contaminates all things with his very breathing. He who withholds his giving deprives himself alone of the gifts of his desiring. Where earth withholds for itself that which it should give, its founts dry up and parched deserts tell of the withholding. When man withholds that which he should give out of himself to enrich himself, he, instead, subtracts from the abundance of himself in the measure of his withholdings. He who withholds love from his home or from his neighbor makes a desert for his very soul. And he who gives love to receive love will find in his receiving the taint which was in his giving. He who serves abundantly will be served with abundance, yea, and he who gives more of service than has been asked of him will multiply within himself that which he has overgiven by increasing his capacity for giving. Love cannot be possessed, therefore ask not for love but give it. The carpenter, or mason, or butcher and all who serve, who limit the service they give to less than that which they receive, thinking that they are thereby enriched, are instead impoverished with a poverty which multiplies. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 593. Within them, as microbes of destruction multiply their power to destroy that within which they grow. Cross not the sacred threshold of your neighbor's house without love in your heart. And when you recross the threshold into the world, carry naught but love there also, for he who carries naught but love is loved by man, but he who carries aught is despised by those whose love he most needs. Man must cease bargaining with man. The bargain has already been made for him by God's one law of rhythmic balanced interchange between every pair of opposites and every transaction of nature. Nature never bargains. Nature balances. The suns of space and the earths which circle them dare not violate it. If our earth just dared for one day to change its orbit, all the seas of earth would strip it clean and wash man into its seas. Yet man dares do it, and when disaster overtakes him he wonders why such things happen to him. He recovers and does it again, and yet again. Man is slow to learn his greatest lesson. Man has but one price with man for service interchange. And that price is equality in re-givings for all who give. He who gives little, little must be re-given, but its value must be equal to the value of service given. And he who gives much, much must be re-given, that is law. It is fixed and cannot be ignored. He who takes more than his balanced share and pays less to the producers of his wealth fills chests with useless gold, which both impoverishes him and all the world of men. For the worker also consumes, but what can the consumer buy with an empty purse? And what does it profit a man whose shelves are piled? Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 594. High and no buyer enters his door. Buyers and sellers are one. All sellers buy and producers consume, just as he who serves is also served. Interchange between each pair constitutes a cycle which repeats itself forever if each half of each cycle is balanced with the other half. The slightest unbalance upsets the cycle, so the bargainer who succeeds in getting just a little more on his side of the equator of balance which controls every transaction between pairs of opposites, then he gives to the other half of it, not only multiplies his own difficulty in completing his transaction successfully but is endangered every moment from its complete collapse. A large percentage of men's failures is due to ignorance of what God requires of him when he deals with his neighbor. What such men do not know is that they are not bargaining with other men, they are bargaining with balance, and balance will not bargain with any man. Balance will allow man to control it, and will work with men who control it, but balance will not work for men, nor let any man violate it even ever so little without threatening his downfall. A simple example will clarify our meaning. Divide your own balance into equal halves by standing up straight. You are then in perfect balance. One half of you is on one side of the equator, which divides your balance into a pair of opposite conditions. You have no difficulty in thus controlling the balance which divides you. It requires practically no effort and you feel no apprehension whatsoever about falling. See Figure 20 on page 232. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 595. One half of you now says to balance, I want more for my positive half, so give my positive half more, and my negative half less than equal shares. So you take more, only a little perhaps, only 5 or 10 degrees of leaning away from that equator of balance which controls you the moment you cease controlling it. Now what happens? You are threatened with falling. You continue to stand, but with sustained effort. You tire because of that effort. If you now try to walk, you will not be able to walk firmly, or with stability. Your balance will vary as it controls you, and soon you give up exhausted. That is why practically everyone runs into difficulties which cause disaster, or problems which they cannot solve. They try to bargain with balance to get just a little more on their side of the equator of their transaction. It never can succeed. No matter what bargain you make with man, you both lose unless God's one law endorses your transaction. Why try to take and lose when it is so much easier to give and win? Man contracts with man. Again we say, as we said of bargaining, man must not contract with man to bind man to agreed upon terms which gives one more than he should have and the other less. Unbalanced contracts do not bind. They breed discontent. The discontented one finds ways of violating his contract, and each one loses more than he thought to gain. He who knows the law, and deals with another who knows the law, needs no contract. neither would violate it, knowing that by so doing he would hurt universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 596. Himself as well as the other party to the contract. That also is law, the law of love and of the brotherhood of man. Man competes with man. Instead of cooperating with man, man must cease competing with man. The familiar quotation, "Competition is the life of trade," is not in accord with the brotherhood of man principle. Cooperation is in accord with it. Competition impoverishes both who compete, while cooperation enriches. Competition lowers quality of product. Cooperation raises it. If you wish to compete, increase the quality of your product. If you write a better book, or preach a better sermon, or build a better mousetrap than your neighbor, the world will make a beaten path to your door. Emerson. He who sells less for less and tells man he is selling more for less than his neighbor, cheats himself and enriches his neighbor, but he who cooperates to sell his neighbor's goods sells more of his own. He alone loses who misrepresents. Likewise, he who prevents his neighbor from freely selling his product by creating a condition of monopoly will lose that which he would protect. A manufacturer of high-quality ice cream created a monopoly in every town in Texas by selling G to only one dealer in every town to give him control in his town. Very soon the monopolist found that people thought his product inferior because the many other dealers would not handle it, and they shunned his one exclusive store. Monopoly in business is foredoomed to failure. It violates God's law of universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 597. Balance and an unbalanced structure cannot stand. He who gathers wealth that way pays for it with loss of soul. The owner of a gasoline station was in deep despair because another man built another station on the opposite corner. He prospered more, rather than less, and when all four corners had similar stations they all prospered more, for more people stocked where service was plentiful. Likewise, one shoe store will prosper more where others are than one alone will. 2 or 10 are not rivals of either one, they are cooperators. Nature does not create rivals. All things in God's universe are one whole, and each unit of the whole is needed by the whole. He who would help a rival in distress enriches himself equally, but he who turns a deaf ear to his appeal will find the whole world deaf when he appeals. If Beethoven destroyed all rival geniuses he would starve in a barren world, whereas he is enriched by every Mozart born into it. There is but one person in this universe. You and your neighbor are that one. Likewise, every man on earth is every other man, all being one. Every man on this earth is an extension of every other man, each man interchanges with every other man. The welfare of each man is dependent upon the nature of the interchange of the whole. Each man's welfare is every other man's responsibility. The sum total of each man's giving determines the standard of man's civilization. What you are doing this moment affects the welfare of every man on this planet. Likewise, the good or ill of any man on this planet affects every other man, from a child in its cradle to a king on his throne. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 598. Henry Ford expressed this thought by saying that the failure of an unknown plumber in a remote village meant one less car sold by him, which means less steel, manganese and other metals and parts from all over the world, even to oils gathered by Chinese coolies. The world of man is all one brotherhood. What any man does to another he does to all men. Each person is the same person. There are not two separate or separable beings in the universe. All are indissolubly united. All are one. From the divine Iliad, Wherein lies our greatest power to unite and save civilization? A powerful group of men and women who are sufficiently united in purpose, whose members run into many millions, can alone save our present civilization from slavery. Which element of our civilization is strong enough to meet these qualifications? The obvious answer is industry, for industry speaks but one friendly universal language which is understood throughout the world, and has but one desire and purpose, which is to interchange service and product with all mankind regardless of race, color or creed. American industry is now the greatest world power, numerically and financially. If it can retain its financial power for 9 more years without being taxed into impotency and then nationalized out of existence, and, during those 9 years, if it can multiply its moral, ethical and financial powers by completing its trend to unify its parts, which it began to do 40 years ago, then American industry can reverse the old system of human relations which brought universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 599, about a discontented warring world, and bring unity and universal brotherhood into it with peace between all men. American industry is not only supporting the most extravagant and wasteful government the world has ever known and contributing unlimited billions to armament, but is giving and lending many billions more to help uplift the morale of discouraged nations and rebuild their ravaged countries. The awakening to the necessity of universal brotherhood. About 40 years ago, American industry suddenly began to discover the asset value of every man to every other man and the interdependence of all men. That discovery was the first step in uniting men into a single purpose of uplifting the living standards of all men by making all men work together as one. Through this discovery of industry, the universal brotherhood of man began to have a real meaning. The machine age and the assembly line increased the need of men, more JOTS.T. intelligent men, more skilled men. The demand for manual labor lessened and for skilled labor increased. With that increased demand, a long pent-up resentment and discontent against the injustice of small pay for overlong hours caused labor to organize its strength and assert it for justice. The war was on between capital and labor, and grew bitter as the demand for labor increased. The slave at last dared to rise against his master. The leveling process demanded by the Golden Rule principle also began its equalization. Unity was on its way in and discontent was on its way out, for there many men of vision who met the challenge by gradual increases in wage and less hours of labor. Universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 600. Henry Ford takes labor into partnership. Henry Ford met the challenge by so conspicuous an increase in the direction of unity that industry at large feared that he was over-generous and criticized him for his announcement that he would henceforth share his profits with his employees to the extent of $10 to $30 million annually. He answered his critics by saying, "Without their cooperation I could not turn a dime. It is just that I share with them." Years later he gave the industrial world great concern by announcing a minimum wage of $5 daily. Many industrialists remonstrated, saying that it would ruin them if they had to meet it. Henry Ford replied in effect, "You are mistaken, my friends. I have found that the more I give, the more I receive. Try it. You will find that you will make more if you give more." Time has proven that Mr. Ford was right. Henry Ford thus put the Golden Rule into action, and many others followed in various manners and degrees. Ignominious labor began to be clothed with dignity. The slave began to sit down with his master, but he was still slave, more highly paid and better fed slave who demanded still more, or else for the slave was still discontented, he still lived on the other side of the tracks, and the monarch could take what was offered him, which was enough to live in a shack, and he should be thankful for that, thankful for even a job. Unity was marching fast though. International Harvester, Standard Oil, Shell Oil, General Electric, Chrysler, Packard, Goodyear, Firestone, Westinghouse, Edison, and all the great utility and other manufacturing companies were giving more and more against the inch-by-inch fight of organized labor to universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 601. Have more and more. Love was not yet born into the world, however. Man still fought man, even though he fought for needed love, and justice, and dignity by the removal of his chains. Concessions came, however, and compromise followed compromise, but the motive was still selfish. Love cannot come into the world that way. Love was on its way though. Wonderful things were happening 40 years ago to awaken the realization of universal brotherhood in the heart of man, even though workers and owners still threatened, and bargained, and cursed, when hating strikers burned factories and angry owners would not yield. Service clubs demonstrate the brotherhood of man, love that born a new power within industry, but apart from it, known as Kiwanis, Lions Exchange, and Rotary Service Clubs. Man's need of man born this new colossal power, and the need of man to serve man came into the hearts of many men who interchanged their services and their products in a new way which gave great happiness to them, instead of the old unhappy way which man dealt with man by warning him with the words, "Let the purchaser beware." The formation of these 4 service clubs is undoubtedly the greatest manifestation of the principle of the universal brotherhood of man, the golden rule and unity that the world has yet known. For 40 years these organizations have been practicing selflessness and service to neighbor before service to self, as they grew into millions of members in every city and town in this country, and have now reached out over the world into more than 30 countries. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 602. Their basis of human relations is the Golden Rule, Buzz.E4SS, integrity and altruistic service without motive other than service. Kiwanis, Lions Exchange, and Rotary are opening the door to let love come into the world by unselfishly practicing it. In them is the leaven which is fast spreading to the whole loaf. Within industry, as members of it, they make possible the infinite multiplicity of industry's power, as industry as a whole discards motive and completes the unity of its 2 equal parts upon a basis of balance. They have no creed, and no doctrine other than the spreading of friendliness, peace and goodwill through absolute adherence to the Golden Rule. If any neighbor is in need, whether a member or not, they take his hurt unto themselves and extend their warm love in service, not coldly, the easy way, by money gifts alone. Together they run a farm for a neighbor who has broken a leg, rebuild another neighbor's uninsured house, and thousands of services which only the closest of brothers would do for each other without motive other than love. How long this intolerant, disunited world has awaited so great an expression of brotherly love, and how great was its need. Thomas 3. Watson infiltrates hierarchics into human relations. Then came another great demonstration of the power of unity which has spread out all over the world since then. The seed of this power germinated in the thoughts of Thomas J. Watson, president of the International Business Machines Corporation and, likewise, president of Kiwanis. In those hard days of the go-getter salesman whose value was appraised by universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 603, the total of his sales, with not too much questioning of the methods he used, when attorneys were retained by all corporations to help them make money within legal bounds without too much questioning of ethics, and business executives frankly claimed that no one could get rich honestly, Mr. Watson thought differently, and he desired to put his altruistic thoughts of service into action against the resistance of business traditions of that day. It was not an easy task in those days, when anyone with high ideals and motives in industry was considered an impractical dreamer, and crucified because of it. Mr. Watson, being thoroughly in agreement with my principles of higher ethics and human relations, which were founded upon natural law, asked me to address his directors and executives to convince them of the scientific basis for his altruism. This talk was the beginning of 12 wonderful years of my association with Mr. Watson in building a code of ethics based upon his ideals, and scientifically interpreting them into a working philosophy, which has so ably proved the practicability of service first in earning power that IBM has never been in the red, even during dark depression days when many corporations faced many deficit years. During those years we founded a school of moral, ethical and business training which has made IBM one of the greatest exponents of the Golden Rule in the business world. Mr. Watson summed this work up in one of his talks in these words: "In all the 79 countries where we do business, we are all one brotherhood. We have but one thought, one creed, mutual helpfulness to each other. We feel universal law, natural science and philosophy." Page 604. That brotherhood in our very handshake, it is real. Our very language is a universal one. We all understand each other, no matter what our tongue. We want that friendliness to reach out into every other business. The golden thread of sharing this is the golden thread thought which is gradually but too slowly uniting the business world today. Like Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions and Exchange, it is leavening the whole loaf, nationally and internationally. Big business is reaching out over the whole world and conquering country after country with gifts of love instead of the sword. The great corporations of the world have given all the territory that each needs for their mutual interchange. They are building friendly empires by giving instead of taking, one which has made a world of hate. That golden thread could be seen interweaving its promise all through the unfolding pattern of those beginning days of the machine age, when the manufacture of quantity product would have been impossible without intelligent and friendly cooperation by labor. Take him into partnership with us. Let him help run our industries, urges Paul Litchfield, as he establishes a mutual governing body in the Goodyear Rubber Company. Give him better homes, insists Walter J. Kohler, following it up by replacing his factory slums with a modern city of homes which attracted the admiration of the beauty-loving world. A new world was in the making by one brother of man finding happiness in fulfilling the needs of another brother. Even though the two great partners of industry still bargained and thought universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 605, of self first in their yieldings, they were coming together, and the world was changing wherever industry brought unity more and more into the world. The basic principle of all of the 5 great religions of the world, the oneness of all men, was being put into action, and the burden of heavy and arduous labor was being lessened as industry and science united for constructive purposes, in contrast with the destructive purposes of science when it unites with government to find more ways of killing more of God's children. The washing machines of science and industry engender love, while the bullets of science and government kindle hot fires of hate. In vain we build the city if we do not also build the man, sings Edwin Markham. Little kindnesses constitute the march to better things, said Sir Edward Beatty. What is the use of mass production without a mass consumer? Cries Henry Ford. The only consumer is man in the mass, and man in the mass is chained to the treadmill. He needs no luxuries. He has neither the time nor the energy after his long day to enjoy them. Release him from his slavery, give him better wages so he can buy our product, free him from the curse of philanthropy, stop patronizing him, give him dignity by making him independent. Invent things for him to buy, said Charles Kettering. Shorten his hours, teach him better things, give him what he wants, and educate him to make our luxuries his necessities. This is not the machine age, it is the age of man, said Thomas Watson. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 606. All our dealings begin with man and end with man. There is nothing higher in this universe than man. To make a business grow, begin growing man. Gerard Swope, Owen D. Young, Walter Chryslers, Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone, Clarence Woolley, Cyrus McCormick, Pierre DuPont, Eastman Kodak, Procter & Gamble, and many others, offered various plans for profit sharing, all aimed toward raising the living standard for man in the mass. So successful were these plans that, in one generation, a factory wage of $20 cents an hour for a long 12-hour day grew to $1 and more for an 8-hour day. The growth is still continuing, but too slowly. We must speed it up. We can do that only by greater comprehension. We must be able to see the picture of unfolding man as a whole. Without that comprehension, capital and labor still experiment, still bargain, still try to get a little more for themselves than for their needed partners. The great tragedy of the age is that the proffered expressions of universal brotherhood extended by owners to workers is too frequently met with resistance. When both sides recognize this resistance as underlying fear which has become accumulative through age-long centuries of unbalanced taking, and realize the sincere desire to create a balance through mutual interchange for the good of both by each giving to the other equally, then indeed unity of purpose will bring abundance to all mankind. Without this mutuality, industry could not be unified. This one world of unified man must come, the plan for 11th hour action by industry. There is only one way for industry to save the human race from degradation. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 60. That way is to immediately multiply the present power of industry 100-fold to its maximum. This it can do by eliminating the last trace of discontent from its working human units, by immediately equalizing the two working parts of industry upon the basis of universal law, and thus multiply their incentive, within which lies their power. This could be done at once if 10 of the many great minds within industry could see the overall picture at once as a whole and institute a procedure which would make it reach its maximum quickly, instead of the slow experimental way it has been painfully following through inability to see the problem as a whole. These 10 men of great vision must bind themselves together as one and accept the sacred trust of extending their vision to the whole of industry to make all of its units see the picture as a whole. This is the immediate first step. Industry must first be one united, cohesive whole. It must be a mighty power of contented men whose happy condition of dignity and security will dissolve discontent in other men, and thus insulate America from the discontented NM whose strength lies in stirring disunity and discontent in American industry. This is the only possible way. A war with guns would not do it. Such a war would defeat us in two directions. even though we win. One would be the irreplaceable loss of vast numbers of our most fit American youths. The other would multiply bureaucracy sufficiently to reduce this proud American democracy to the slave condition of an autocracy. This has already happened in China, where more than 1 million of its universal law, natural science and philosophy page 608 intellectuals have been mercilessly executed within a few months, and in Russia, where all of its intellectuals who could not escape have been slaughtered and many millions of peasants starved within a few years. Do not be so naive as to think that it could not happen here. The Chinese of 5 years ago thought that it could not happen there, but hitdid. This country could not withstand another 4 years of war without being engulfed in the deep depths of moral degradation which is now sweeping decency, justice, and the last trace of kindliness off the face of the earth, and substituting for it an inhuman brutality heretofore inconceivable as possible for the human race. Why are we so blind that we do not see chaos ahead of us when half the world is already deep into the first stages of another 7 centuries of dark ages? Why do we lack the courage and common sense to do something about it? Why do we still think that the money we make today is more important than preventing a return to cannibalism tomorrow? It is already happening here. Why do we think it will not happen in America when the seed of it is sprouting visibly in every department of American life? Comprehension, and a realization of our danger can stop it if we but have the courage to apply our knowledge. The weapon for it is in our hands. We must use it or go and perish. There is no alternative. The only weapon to use against fanatical hate, disunity and discontent is the moral, impregnable armament of millions of contented and united men, who are banded together with the impregnable bonds of universal brotherhood, all working as one, all voting as one for a righteous, ethical leader of the universal law, natural science and philosophy page 609 nation, and all serving each other as one. 10 united men who comprehend the power of universal law when you work with it, could institute a quick educational PR9 center which would unify 80 millions of people within a few months. This must be done within a few months, and it could be by an organized educational campaign as outlined herein. As one sheaf of 10 kernels of wheat could fill the granaries of the world, 10 leaders of men representing the 2 working arms of industry can extend to another 10, and they to another 10 men of vision and industry, until legions shall again multiply into an invincible force working with universal law to dissolve that sinister force which is working against it. Again we say that is the only way. All men seek peace and happiness. The sole purpose of man on earth is to seek the kingdom of heaven, in which he will find peace and happiness. Mankind can find peace and happiness only through knowing the oneness of man. 80 million men and women who have found the oneness of implicit trust in each other, through their unity for one common purpose, cannot be divided into 2 opposed parties, for 2 opposed parties would represent 2 desires, and 2 purposes, not one. These would vote together as one. An undivided oneness of purpose is not debatable. 2 opposed and divided purposes are debatable, so long as the policies, desires or purposes of man are necessarily debatable. The unity of man must await the outcome of debate. We have wasted 40 years, in debate, argument, compromise, yielding too little, bargaining too little at a time, bargaining too long each time, all because universal law, natural science and philosophy page 610 divided man wanted a little more for himself, a little less for his mate, For 40 years creators and producers cheated each other out of power which unity would have given them, each thinking that the concessions made by compromise and bargain were adding to their strength. For 40 years these endless debates continued to divide employers and employees into two opposed groups with two opposed purposes, that of getting as much as each working arm of industry could get out of the other working arm. And as they bargained they hurt each other. Employees struck and withheld service. Less bricks were laid, less joy in work, less incentive, less initiative, more advantage taken by weekday absence for weekend double time. Owner lost heavily. Worker lost heavily. Each caused the other to lose. Employers conserve, lay thousands off, periodically devise other methods, other materials to outwit double-time plotters. Unity comes too slowly that way. Unity begins when debate ends. We cannot wait for unity to come through slow debate and gradual yieldings. There is not time. All the wealth and power of all owners and workers alike will too soon be worthless to them unless bargaining debates end now and unity begins now. Every time owner and worker have come closer together through yielding to each other and debate, each have made more product and more money. The truth of that fact is not debatable. If that fact is true, it is also true that when they come so close together that they will unite as one, their product and universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 611, profits will then be maximum. Why, then, do we take the slow, and hard, and costly way? Notable examples of this fact are the Eastman Kodak Company and Procter & Gamble. Their profit-sharing plans have practically ended any labor troubles and have increased their earnings through giving incentive, initiative and contentment to their employees. Each employee gives maximum service because he feels that every dollar he earns for the company is partly his. The plasterer or bricklayer withholds because he lacks that incentive. Conceitedly undebatable facts of industry. Industry exists for the purpose of conceiving ideas and producing bodies to manifest its ideas. We have, therefore, in industry, creators and producers, those who think ideas for bodies and those who make bodies for ideas. The fact that each of these two is of no value without the other is undebatable. Also the fact that each is of value when interchanging with the other is undebatable. It necessarily follows that each is of equal value. We have other names for them, but they have the same meaning. We call them owner and worker, or capital and labor, or management and labor. The owner is he who supplies the idea for product and the worker capital to produce it, and the 3A, ERKERE are those who manufacture the product. The relation of owner, or capital, to worker, or labor, is the relation of the fulcrum to a lever. The fulcrum supplies the power to both ends of the universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 612, lever to motivate their work, but the fulcrum does no work, nor do the two workers supply power, or capital, to the fulcrum. It is not correct, therefore, to call capital and labor the two opposites of industry, nor the two workers of industry. Capital is one, it represents idea, or owner or creator. It is the fulcrum from which the lever extends, and the working lever is two. Capital, owner, and labor are three, not two. They are a trinity, as the swinging pendulum is a trinity of two moving parts extending from one which does not move. Mars, the electric battery, is a trinity of two oppositely polarized cells extending from an equator which divides and motivates their interchange, or as an engine is a trinity of compression-expansion conditions which are extended from a static dead center which is an equilibrium between the two. Labor is, therefore, not one, but two. Labor occupies opposite ends of the industrial engine. Labor works two ways, toward compression and toward expansion. Industry is polarized into positive and negative workers. These two workers interchange to create product. The two workers of industry are the producers. It is not correct, therefore, to use the term management and labor, for management is labor. It is not correct, also, to differentiate the two working producers of industrial product by a white-collar superior class called management, and an inferior overall class which is called labor. Both are workers or producers. To exalt one and debase the other, inferentially, is to continue discontent. Also it is short-sighted, for class of distinction is dissolving, as workers' children gradually become cultured. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 613. University men who will refuse to become laborers but would become producers. As standards of living rise, there will be no uneducated laborers. Such a classification would drive laborers out of industry as servants have been driven out of homes. To classify a bookkeeper or salesman as management, and a skilled lathe worker, or precision instrument maker as labor, would be forcing the perpetuation of the master and slave relation, which must disappear from the face of this earth by being blotted out of human relations. Under the law of balance, the slave will always rise to slay his master. To ennoble a bookkeeper as management and debase the highly efficient and intelligent producer of gear wheels as labor would eventually make it impossible to secure highly paid mechanics. Management must look forward to the time when uneducated laborers who live on the other side of the tracks will be living in pretty little homes on the same streets, and their growing youths taking degrees from the same universities. Growing sons of laborers who have become intellectual and cultural equals or even superiors of office workers, may seek to become salesmen, research workers, engineers or executives. Or they may seek professional careers, but they most certainly will not become ignoble laborers, while the lesser skilled white-collar office worker is presumably a superior being. The polarity of industry. The two workers of industry are those who manufacture product and those who distribute it. The worker who manufactures is the positive cell of the universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 614. Industrial battery. The worker who distributes is the negative cell. Balanced interchange between the two make for maximum power. Any unbalance in either, no matter how slight, lowers the potential of industry's power. Producing workers of positive polarity are the designers, research workers, construction engineers, chemists, metallurgists, laboratory workers, carpenters, masons, machine makers, and all those who actually build the bodies of product. They produce product. Distributing workers of negative polarity are the sales force, advertisers, bookkeepers, public relations workers, and all those who actually distribute product to consumers. They produce sales of product. The fact that either of these are powerless without the other is undebatable. That it is also an undebatable fact. Value arises only by interchange between the two. If each are vitally necessary to the other, what justification has either one to bargain with the other, saying, "What I give is more important and of more value than what you give, so I want more than half"? The other refuses to concede this and goes on strike. Neither half then receives any value whatsoever. Row likewise 4. The owner of the idea, say to his two working producers of product and producers of sales, "Without me you could not earn $1, so you will take what I am willing to give you or go without." The worker took what he could get for many years, for he was helpless. Not so today. The producers, labor, now say, without us you could not earn $1, try it. And they quit. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 615. The necessity for equality is undebatable. Equal service is of equal value. Why bargain? The bargain is already made. God's law gives equally of that which is given. He who gives less is given less. Why bargain then, if bargaining is so costly to the bargainer? Why not work with the law and obtain maximum blessings by giving maximum blessings? The positive cell of the battery does not demand more than 1/2 of the whole potential on the ground of superiority of service, or of importance. Nor does the North Pole of a magnet ask for more than half, for if it could be possible to lessen 1/2 the other would be weakened equally. No, neither pair of any opposites in nature is stronger than its weak half, nor is there stability in any unequally divided pair. Nature is the great teacher. The more the industrial machine is like that of nature, the more perfectly it works to produce its maximum of product with a minimum of resistance. Universal brotherhood, last weapon left to man. God's command from the divine Iliad, go thou therefore to 10 men. Who will believe on thee, and multiply thou them by 10 and yet again 10, until an army shall be as a wall of granite beneath thy feet. These words hold a sacred command to all who read them within their eyes, for the time has come when man must work to bring unity into the world or perish by his own hand. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 616. Our world is toppling through unbalanced conditions in every element of human relations. That balance must be restored lest we again destroy ourselves. Fear, hate, discontent and disunity must go out of our human relations, and love must come in. Taking unequally by force must be replaced by giving equally with love. This deeply suffering world has long been saying that a miracle must happen to save us. There is no magic wand which wishful thinking can use to perform the miracle now needed by man. That miracle which can happen to save the world lies within you and your neighbor. Street, there must come the great awakening of the world to its danger by those who comprehend the danger. That awakening should come like a great siren reaching out into the comprehension of the whole country by a campaign of education instituted by industry to gather all men together in an organized movement for working with a greater singleness of purpose than the world has ever known. That one single purpose is to bring the universal brotherhood of men into world consciousness and thus unite all men as one. Plan of campaign for uniting mankind. 1. 10 known leaders in industry and world thought must be found who will dedicate themselves to giving mankind his divine heritage. These 10 must become a committee to reach out and find yet again 10, as instructed. Copies of these teachings can then be sent by this committee to other great universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 617. Industrial leaders and thinkers, who head the great corporations of the country, and to those who have been most active in the furthering of closer relations between the two great partners who create and produce the material necessities of men, send a strongly worded letter with these teachings, signed by one member for the whole, urging immediate study of the plan and preparation for a mass conference to be held at Swannanoa, the headquarters of the Walter Russell Foundation, from where, on this glorious mountaintop in Virginia, these teachings are being sent all over the world. During the past 3 years, students from all over the world have been gathering here to study and prepare themselves for bringing this higher knowledge into being. Here in this beautiful palace and gardens which have been dedicated to the unification of man, the most historic decision ever made by UN shall be consummated and broadcast to all the world, whilst scroll herald the news of peace and goodwill to all mankind for this new age of cosmic man now dawning, which shall endure for 3,000 years, as promised to man. That momentous decision shall be that the division of profits made by owners and producers in industry henceforth be mutually shared equally, in harmony with the universal law of rhythmic balanced interchange which inexorably governs every transaction, great and small, in nature's whole universe, to apply the law of rhythmic balanced interchange. This division means that after all expenses of operation are paid, including amortization of an universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 618 addition to capital investment, a proper reserve set aside and salaries of all workers paid, the net amount, which is the actual profit made by the mutual service rendered by all workers, is to be equally divided, one half going to the owner, which is capital either as an individual, partner group or stockholder group, and the other half to be divided pro rata, as a percentage above salary, for each worker in the entire plant, inclusive. By workers we mean all who give active service, whether they be presidents, directors, managers of sales or other departments, assistants, stenographers, bookkeepers, salesmen, and other office help, and all workers, in every department who create the product, including even the least paid porters or sweepers. This means of sharing is a recognition of the fact that every cog in the wheel of the industrial machine is of relatively equal value to the whole machine. A system of stamp books could be devised which could be issued to each employee, each stamp representing number of hours of service rendered by each employee, and each calling for a pro rata share of the dividend set aside for that purpose. Such a division would give equal dignity as well as equal justice to the overall worker and white-collar worker. It would also kindle incentive and initiative in each worker to give his maximum of service and loyalty, for he would feel that every dollar which he added to earnings was being justly shared by him. From the moment this momentous decision is made, and millions of Americans unite to work with the law instead of against it, this nation, universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 619, will begin its approach to that high ideal set for it by Lincoln as a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. The basis of our educational program 14 here, at Swannanoa is man himself. 1. Man himself as an individual. His purpose on earth, man collectively as a whole, his oneness with man and God. 3. Man as a working unit of nature and controlled by nature. 4. Man's relation to man, to the universe, and to the laws of the universe by which his every action is governed. 5. The mind of man, the thinking of mind. Inspiration in man, the awakening of genius in man, his consciousness, his soul, his power. 6. Application of knowledge of man's relation to the universe and the building of character, dignity, honor, ethics and integrity without which man as an individual or as a civilization cannot hold together. The 10 chosen leaders and their affiliated committees should unite with the Walter Russell Foundation to organize an intensive distribution of this program which would permeate every element of life including every department of government. Every element of thought distribution should be used. homes and neighborhood groups, radio, motion pictures, the press, magazines, newspapers, business groups, service clubs, Boy Scouts and IHRTS, women's clubs, and all other means of intercommunication between men. Every radio and press advertiser should plan his advertisements in harmony with these teachings, a tremendous opportunity for cooperation in building our needed wall of universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 620. Truth lies with the motion picture industry. Great writers could so effectually symbolize the workings of the brotherhood of man in story form that millions of people could visualize its workings and emulate them with growing comprehension. It would be impossible to estimate the value to the world of such cooperation by motion picture producers. It goes without saying that stories visualizing the horrors of what goes on behind the Iron Curtain would stimulate action by all people. Likewise, it goes without saying that motion pictures should eliminate all gangster and underworld stories which glorify crime and criminals, for such pictures add materially to crime by the making of criminals. 6. Education. It is of vital importance that organized education cooperate with our national program of building our moral and ethical wall of truth consisting of millions of men of highest honor and integrity. Education should begin with the children to instill into them the qualities which knowledge alone gives. Hitler trained his youth to hate, and Stalin is teaching them to denounce God. As the twig is bent, so is the tree inclined. Education has long felt the desire for a new concept and a new practice in its work of increasing the intelligence of a nation. In our program outlined above, education could find that new concept. The basic purpose of education is the building of man by giving him knowledge, the awakening of genius in him, and of desire in him for creative expression. Modern educational program at FES do not awaken genius or inspiration. On Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 621. The contrary, they suppress genius and develop inferiority complexes and frustration, which discourage the really bright students. Modern education teaches students to remember and repeat information concerning effect. Instead of that, it should teach them to think and to know the cause of those effects. Information is not knowledge. A human encyclopedia may have all the information in the world, yet be without knowledge, just as food is not nourishment until it has been transformed to the bloodstream of life. Information is not knowledge until comprehension has transformed it from its record on the brain to the consciousness of mind. Great geniuses, such as Edison, Mark Twain and countless others, have been considered stupid in school and given low marks because they could not pass the intelligence tests which lesser students with photographic memories could easily pass. Parrot-like minds are not usually creative, and great creative minds are never parrot-like. If education desires to develop a highly cultured civilization, it should develop creative powers in men, not imitators who add nothing to world culture. 7. Religion. The scientific meaning of the brotherhood of man could be added to all religious teachings, for man's comprehension is ready and waiting for this new knowledge. The brotherhood of man in action should be part of all religious teachings. When all great religious groups concede that all men are the children of God regardless of their race, color or creed, then God will at last be recognized as the only power in the world. BRAL1NLN and the Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 622. Worship of personalities will cease. The worship of idols, and then personalities, have been the cause of division and disunity in religions. For this reason the world is divided into 5 disunited religions of irreconcilable views, all being intolerant. 5s one each other, yet all must worship the same one God. Disunity in religion has divided the world of men into intolerant groups. When there is but one religion and one God whom all men worship alike, religion will then be the most powerful force in the world. 8. The Walter Russell Foundation was solemnly dedicated to the purpose of disseminating this new knowledge, and we have for 3 years been spreading this great divine Iliad message for the saving of the human race throughout the world through our books, home study course, Ezcharias and Summer Student Saraswar. There are deeply inspired students like yourself, who are forming study groups in practically every country of the world. With the cooperation of the combined efforts of all elements of life as organized into a cohesive whole by the genius of the 10 leaders, who will be chosen to gather together the forces which will build this great wall of truth, we will add to our present activities an extensive program of disseminating this new knowledge by radio, nationwide lectures, teachers, and the organizing of study groups 1, as well as a daily lesson to adults and to children which will go forth by radio from Swannanoa to all the country. We will also publish as soon as possible all books and literature and popular bindings at the lowest cost possible so that they may be accessible to all. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 623. In addition to the glorious marble palace and gardens of Swannanoa, our plans include the erection of a temple of learning on the highest point of this sacred mountain, which will seat 10,000 people and will in itself be a world broadcasting station. Conclusion: will you who read this with all mankind again turn a deaf ear to God's message given yet again today in man's hour of peril? Will you lay it aside after reading it and say, "How terrible"? I hope someone will do something about it, and then turn to business as usual to make another $1,000, which may cost you the agony of seeing your own children suffer untold ignominy and your elderly parents liquidated as useless encumbrances. You can do something about it by calling your neighbors together and telling them of their danger, then uniting with a great effort of industry to build an impregnable wall of truth which will alone save you from the agonies which will be yours and ours within our lifetime unless we turn away from the dark toward a light. The tragedy of human nature is that when we have a comfortable bed to sleep in, plenty of food and clothing, our children going happily and freely to school and parties, having a car to transport us and making more money than ever, we say everything is fine. That is what a hat manufacturer in Hungary who had 80 employees, a city home and a country villa had thought until the economic police stepped in and took over his factory for the state because he had more than 5 employees. They allowed him to open a small shop with 4 employees until it was universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 624. Successfully running, the economic police again stepped insane. From this moment on, this business and all its mobile and immobile assets belong to the state. Hand over your keys, all of them. Keys to your villa too. Let's see the books. Good. Bank statements. Good. Your private bank account too. Now let's see what you have in your pocket. Thus this prosperous manufacturer became a pauper and an outcast in less than 5 minutes. You still do not think it can happen to you perhaps? Remember that it is the physically weak intelligent mafia who are killed off as useless and their wealth confiscated, while the physically strong worker is made a slave at heavy labor until he either commits suicide or succumbs from fatigue. These were fine people. Like you, cultured people, the wife a gifted pianist, the son a noble youth like your sons. He escaped through bloodhound guarded boundaries with 3 others who fear that all their relatives have been liquidated. and the sun looked for whale 5 God I. Asked hoped escaping to America and watched for his opportunity for 2 long years, where is there another America for us to escape to? This is what the Sun said. Degrees in 1948 they nationalized the factories. In 1949 they liquidated the wholesale trade, in 1950 they started taking over the stores. And now there is nothing to liquidate but the people. From Saturday Evening Post, October 15, 1951. Place yourself in these people's position. 5 years ago they had as much freedom to live, and work, and laugh happily as you now have. Today hundreds of thousands of similar happy homes in Hungary alone are wrecked. Old Folks Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 625. Killed, strong men forced to labor until death mercifully releases them, and pretty daughters forced into the slavery of concubinage, until they too mercifully die. Awaken and act to save yourself and your fellow men, for remember your enemy is not just inhuman, he is unhuman. Stop appeasing and feeding your deadly enemy. Awaken as New Zealand awakened and stopped appeasing communists after they so completely tied up her shipping that thousands of volunteer citizens had to load and unload her ships lest her people starve. Stop hiring communists. Stop feeding them. Stop appeasing them. Stop fearing them. Eliminate them from our government, our labor unions, our factories, as we would eliminate termites in our foundations or vermin in our cellars. Degrees the liberty of free speech we are giving them they are using to deprive us of the very freedom to live. They cannot possibly live in this country unless we support them. There are too many of them, tens of thousands of them, being fed by us whom they would destroy. Let us build our impregnable wall of truth and exclude all who are opposed to truth. They feed upon untruth, upon discontent, upon disunity. Our great wall of truth will have nothing within it upon which communism can feed. That is the way to fight communism. There is no place for a communist in a unified world. Communists are opening the door for us to degradation and oblivion. We are helping them to open that door. It is inconceivable that humans of our intelligence could be so simple and so naive as that. Yet we great universal question, what can we do to save mankind from destruction? It is the first time that mankind has been given this conclusive answer. There is no other way that mankind can be saved, and the time is short. Therefore, we urge you, each and every one, go forth and spread the message given to you in these lessons. Live this message and tell all and everyone why they must live God's universal law. Explain to them the one law of rhythmic balanced interchange which must be the basis of every transaction between men. Demonstrate to them just how it has worked in your life. Remember God's command in the Iliad, see me, be me, know me. Be thou fulcrum of thine own power. If you will follow this command and live these teachings, America can be the savior of the world. For this great country is the only country where man's free will can win freedom for him and the world, and that freedom can only be saved by the power which unity gives to man. God bless you for so valiantly going forward with us, for we know that with your help a new and glorious day will dawn. Our loving thoughts to you always. Sincerely, Walter and Lau Russell. P.S. In our next unit of lessons we will continue the subject of Unit 3, but we know you will realize the urgent need for this special unit at this time. W. and L. R. 628.